Good morning, my friends. Welcome to day 2. Before I get started, I'm going to feed my ferment here. I'm going to add a cup of water. I might be using it tonight. I haven't quite decided what we're doing for dinner. It's going to really depend on the heat. I'm going to add in, this time, 2 cups of flour. I want it closer to a bread dough. I might add a little more because if I use it tonight, I'm going to need it closer to a dough. You let it stand for a couple of hours and then it's ready to go. So I'm going to mix this in and let it ferment a little bit longer. Okay, I realize these videos are getting a little bit long. So I did a little bit of prep ahead. For day 2 breakfast, I am making a blackberry coffee cake. In this bowl, and I will leave the ingredients below, I have 1 cup of flour, a 1/4 teaspoon of salt, and you're supposed to use a teaspoon of baking powder. I do not have baking powder. They were out at the store, so I added a teaspoon of baking soda, and in order to make it closer to baking powder, you need to add some type of an acid. So in my milk, I have 1/3 cup of milk. I added 1 teaspoon of my apple cider vinegar. That will be the acid needed to make this rise better. In my other bowl here, I creamed together my 1/2 cup of sugar and 1/4 cup or 4 tablespoons of that margarine. And now I just need to stir in this 1 egg. All right, now that it's well combined, I'm going to add some of the flour mixture, about half or so, and my milk. I'm going to stir those up really well. And then I will add the rest of my flour. Okay, you just want to stir your batter until it's combined. You don't want to overbeat it and get too much gluten going, or it's going to be a little bit tough. So that's going to go into a well-greased pan. And I have I'm using my toaster oven because it's really warm here. I have it preheated to 350 degrees. Let me get this in here. I have my batter spread out in my baking pan, and on top of that, I'm going to add a pretty good amount of my blackberries that I foraged. I love berries. I would say of everything, that's probably my favorite. So the next thing I'm going to do is make a crumble for the top. In here I have 1/3 cup of flour, 1/3 cup or 5 tablespoons of brown sugar, and 2 tablespoons of butter. And all you have to do is cut this in so it is quite crumbly. It look like that with a bunch of little pieces of the margarine in it. I'm sorry if I refer to it as butter throughout these videos. Please forgive me. I normally don't use margarine, so I may slip up and call the margarine butter. But I'm just going to take that topping and sprinkle it on top. It should make a really pretty generous topping. All right, now this is going in my preheated 350 degree oven. I will let you know the time after because I did make this a smaller version than the 9x13. So the 9x13 takes 45 to 60 minutes. I'm going to start this out at 25 to 30 minutes, but I'll let you know the exact baking time once I take it out. To show you how beautiful my coffee cake came out, and it took me about 40 minutes to bake, just so you know. And I'm going to cut me a slice and see how it tastes. Right, here's the most important part. Oh my goodness, that is really good. Those blackberries got juicy, the topping's a little bit crispy, and the cake is nice and tender. So this is definitely one that's going to be used more than once, probably with other fruit. But I cut it into 6 servings, so each of us get 2 days worth. You could use it as a dessert. You could use it, like I am, as a brunch. But either way, you really need to try this. I added about 2/3 cup more flour to the fermented dough. You want it to be loose and sticky, little bit sticky, just a little bit. But this type of dough you want kind of wet. I took a pie pan and I greased it up really good with some of that margarine because I'm going to divide this up. I think for dinner tonight, I want to make a deep dish pizza. So I'm going to take a little of my oil. I want to oil my hands up really good because this stuff is really, really sticky. And just going to pull it away from the bowl a little bit because I want to get about a little more than half of this, I think. I'm going to go about here and see if that will be enough because I'm using a fairly large cast iron pan to make my pizza. I'm going to need a fair amount of dough here. Well, it ain't going to do much that way, is it? So I'm going to grab it, pinch it, and I'm going to loosely put that in my pie plate. Okay, because I'm going to let this ferment again for another couple hours before I make dinner. I'm going to take a little bit of oil on my hand, and I want to, if you have spray, that works too. I just want to cover, don't want it drying out too much, and I don't want it to stick to plastic wrap. So I'm oiling that up a bit. So that is the balance of my dough. I think I'm going to add a little more water to that and a little bit more flour to this dough because since I have to have the oven on anyway tonight to make the pizza, I might as well make some bread to go with it. So anyway, that is part of our meal prep for tonight. Now, if you do not want to have to use yeast the next time, do yourself a favor and pinch off some of that dough. Put it in a container, whether it be a bowl or a jar. I prefer to use a jar. Then what I will do is I will add a 1/2 cup of water, a 1/2 cup of flour, and I will let this get nice and bubbly on my counter overnight again. Then it can be put in the refrigerator and held until you're ready to use it later in the week. When you go to use it, put in another 1/2 cup of water, a 1/2 cup of flour, shake it up really good, let it get nice and bubbly, and then you can make your next loaf of bread or pizza crust or whatever it is you want to use it for. For my dinner, which is going to be a deep dish pizza, which I'm probably crazy because of the heat, but I'm going to add in the beginning 2 tablespoons of oil. Now this is what gives that deep dish that crispy crust, and it has to cover the bottom of the skillet. This is a 12-inch, so I may have to go with a little more, but it looks like it's covering it pretty well. Okay, make sure it's covered very well. Put a little oil on your hands because now you're going to, oh, whoa, definitely didn't need to do that. So we have plenty of oil. I'm going to take some back out of the pan and save it for a rainy day. Yeah, that's a good extra tablespoon that I don't need in there right now. All right. Blooper. All right, so now I oiled up my hands because I'm going to be moving this dough. You can see how nicely risen it's gotten. into the pan. Let's see if I can do this where you can see both. Fortunately, my camera stand's not that tall. So you're going to very gently loosen it from the side. Basically, all I want to do is transfer it to that pan without knocking out too much of the air. So let's see how I can do this, okay? There we go. All right, now I set that aside. And one of the reasons I oiled my hand was to pick it up, but the other is you want to gently, you don't want to knock out all the air bubbles, but you need to push this close, almost to the very edge of your pan. Use your fingertips and just kind of smush it around, maneuver it, whatever you want to call it, lightly to get it in where it needs to go. And I may need to suck up a little bit of that oil. It just looks like a little bit too much still. But, okay. Now, do this about an hour before you want to cook because you want it to rest again. And it should come up pretty much to the sides of your pan. So if you get too much oil, grab a paper towel and just soak it up. It won't hurt anything, that's for sure. But the more oil you use in this, actually, the better, because it gets that crispy, almost like deep fried crust that most people like on their pizzas. Wow, that's a lot of oil. Okay. So I'm going to very gently push this back into place and cover it again, just because I live on a farm and we get a lot of flies sometimes. And I'm going to let this rest for a good hour before I finish making it. We're still well oiled. I just went, this was actually almost level with the top. I went around the bowl and I simply take the sides and put them into the center. It knocks some of the air out and it develops a little bit of gluten. You want to go, I go around the bowl like 3 or 4 times and just kind of make a puddle. Normally I would have a second bowl out, flour to turn it into, but I don't want to make any more dishes than I already have today. So I'm going to set this aside on a little bit of flour on my counter, and then I'm going to wash the bowl and put it back in there to rise. I washed my bowl, and because it was there, I used that paper towel that had all the oil I sopped up on it. You want to flour once you turn it out. You can also knead it on here. Flour the top of the bread pretty well, and then you're going to carefully, pick it up and place it in your bowl. I like to kind of round it off, kind of like a little ball. Okay, and then I can use some of this extra flour that I have here and make sure the other side is well floured. And I put it around the edge of the bowl so that it hopefully will not stick later. Okay, cover it up, let it rise 45 minutes to an hour, and we'll have a loaf of bread to go in the oven when the pizza goes in. Ready to make dinner, and while I was waiting for everything to rise, I shredded up my 8-ounce block of cheese, and I went, quote, foraging through my freezer to see if there was anything that I needed to use up. Well, I found some of the mushrooms that I foraged last year. I must have used a part of the bag because these were getting kind of, all that frost and stuff in them. So I'm going to use these up. And I found a bag of sad little bacon pieces. I don't know why I saved them, honestly, but that's all there was in there. Again, getting freezer burns, so I'm going to use it up. It's up to you what you want to put on your pizzas. If you like veggie pizzas, you could put peppers and onions and all kinds of stuff. If you have a little sausage, I could have taken some of that sausage and sliced it up like pepperonis and fried it. I really didn't want to go through all that. I just wanted to use up stuff that I had laying around. Now remember, part of eating on an extreme budget is looking at what you have and using it up before it goes bad. So that's what I'm doing here. Right, I need to apologize. My dog started barking and I forgot to turn the camera back on, but I hope you could see that this dough, it has gotten fluffy and bubbly and really good. And I took some of that pasta sauce, again, a little bit earlier, because remember, I had a good hour, hour and a half. I put it in the saucepan. I added some garlic powder, onion powder. I don't like pieces of basil, so I put some basil in there that I could fish out. And I think some of my chives might have been in there, but I left those whole so I could fish them out. Then I let it cool and spread it on top of my pizza dough. One of the reasons I bought that pasta sauce was because it had herbs and stuff in it, and it was less expensive than buying pizza sauce, so I get kind of double duty with it. Now what I'm going to do, and I do want some of this cheese right up against the edge because I like the little crispies that sort of get on the pan pizza. I may not use all of this cheese, and if I don't, that's perfect, because once I make bread, if anybody gets hungry during the week, they can slice bread, take a little bit of that pasta sauce, pop some cheese on it and whatever else they like, and make a quick little, we call them French bread pizzas because it's that artisan bread. All right, so I'm going to save some of that cheese out. I'd say I used, probably, well, I'm going to add a little bit down the middle. You got to have lots of cheese on these. I probably used 2/3 of it, maybe. All right, now I'm going to spread on the little bit of mushrooms that I have. In the meantime, I have my oven and my Dutch oven preheating to 450 degrees. The Dutch oven is for the bread, which I'm going to cook at the same time. So I have a little bit of bacon to use up here. I said not a whole lot, but with bacon, a little flavor goes a long way. If I had thought about it, that would have been really good. I could have saved, I always save my bacon grease in the freezer. I could have spread the bacon grease on the bottom. That would have been really good. So this is the cheese I have left. And while my oven is preheating, I am going to let this sit for just a minute. Okay, I have one of my oven racks at the lowest setting, and that's where my pizza's going to go. And then I have the one for the bread probably about midway. Remember, when you take this out, this thing is screaming hot. It's at 450 degrees. Last thing you want to do is burn yourself. So I just floured my hands a little bit. I'm going to grab my dough very gently and coax it into, just in case I have to touch it, which I might have to a little bit, I'm going to coax it into this Dutch oven here. And whatever shape it gets, it's going to get. It usually rounds itself out a little bit. Now, carefully, remember the lid is hot. You put the lid on. The pizza's going to bake between 25 and 30 minutes. The bread's going to go closer to 45. So I put them in at the same time so I can kind of keep them relatively straight in my head. So when I set the timer for 25 minutes, I know this one, after 25 to 30 minutes, you take the top off and let the crust get nice and brown. So it kind of works to my favor. Quick, how I get double duty. See the pizza at the bottom and the bread at the top. Okay, my pizza is out of the oven and it looks so good. You're going to want to let this cool for a good 5 minutes because it is bubbly hot. I also took the top off of the Dutch oven that the bread is cooking in, and that goes another at least 20 minutes or so. Okay, now be honest. Doesn't that look delicious? I got my big old knife out, and On these, I like to start sort of at the middle, come down. It doesn't crush the side quite as bad. Can you hear that crust? Ho, ho, ho. Isn't that fabulous? Turn it around. I want to show you at the bottom real quick here. Now, look at that. Let me show you the bottom of this. Crispy, crunchy, just like a good old-fashioned deep dish pizza. So that's going to be our dinner tonight. And I will show you, oop, that one got a little funky, my bread when it's all done. Oh, there we go. I can't wait to dig in. Oh, fresh from the oven. Isn't that a gorgeous loaf of artisan bread? They are so easy to make. There's no reason why you can't bake your own bread. But the key is to have a covered Dutch oven or even a Pyrex bowl, whatever, but it needs to be covered. So if you're enjoying these videos so far, I would really appreciate a thumbs up and consider subscribing and hit that little bell because I'm going to be doing a lot more recipes over the next few weeks. So I really hope you guys have a wonderful day. Time for me to go eat a great slice of pizza.